Bat Force Radio.
Bat Force Radio is rated M for mature, or should that be immature?
Hey guys, Dustin Witt.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder.
This is Paul Dini.
And you're listening to Bat Force Radio.
And you're listening to Bat Force Radio.
You're listening to Bat Force Radio.
This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman, and you're listening to Bat Force Radio, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to Bat Force Radio, the Batman and DC podcast with no limits. This week we have Grandpa Batman in Texas.
Howdy.
I'm Robin Cross in Canada, and this week's guest is an Eisner Award-winning creator and author of books like The Many Deaths of Laila Starr at Boom Studios, Blue Green at Image Comics, These Savage Shores at Vault Comics, the currently ongoing Venom at Marvel, as well as Swamp Thing and Aquaman Andromeda at DC. On July 26th, he takes over Detective Comics on issue 1062 with part 1 of Gotham Nocturne, along with Raphael Albuquerque and Dave Stewart. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ram V.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Just
want to jump in and correct you a little bit there. I haven't won the Eisner yet, but God bless you for assuming I will.
Yeah, maybe I. Well, didn't Blue Green? Did Blue Green win?
Blue and Green won for best artist, so I will not steal Anand's Eisner from him.
I guess I just get it in my head that it was the Eisner winning book, and that was all that I considered. But you since we're on to that topic, you are nominated this year for Best Writer, along with people like James Tynan and. I got to think you have a great chance there. So, fingers crossed for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's nice to be nominated and all of that, and I think it's cooler to have Laila Starr nominated for Best Book as well. So, I'm quite excited to see the outcome of that one. You know, it would be nice to win the Best Writer as well, but as you said, I have some stiff competition. So.
And a book like Laila Starr now. A lot of our audience, I'm aware, they don't read a whole lot beyond, DC and Marvel stuff. Mm-hmm. But if you guys aren't reading stuff from other publishers, things like Laila Starr or Blue Green that Image did, and a lot of stuff that Ram and a lot of other creators are doing, you're really missing a lot of great stuff out there. So if you don't already expand your horizons, it's really a time you should be doing that.
But, absolutely. Read more comics.
Yeah. There's no shortage of things there. There are new things out every week. If you go into your shopping, like, oh, there's only one new Batman book this week, there are 20 other new things. So check some other things out. But I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. I know you've had a busy day among a series of busy days getting ready. You're going to head over to America soon for San Diego. Yep. You've got the Eisners happening while you're there. So a lot going on. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
My pleasure.
Now, before we get too far into things, I know you explained this recently in a DC print interview, but maybe so people can hear you say it phonetically. Now, Ram V is sort of a pen name as a result of an Indian custom that doesn't make sense with Western customs relating to your father's name. So do you want to let people hear you?
My full name is Ram Narayan Venkatesen. And Venkatesen is my dad's name, and it starts with a V. And it's kind of like the Nordic convention, right? You use your first name, and then you have your father's name following it. And that's kind of how South Indian Tamil naming conventions work. But when I joined the school in Bombay, they said I had to have a third name. And so my mom used my caste as my last name. and I don't really enjoy that. So I stuck with Ram Venkatesen, and then people started calling me Mr. Venkatesen, which is really my dad. So I was left with no option but to go, no, it's Ram V. And then following which, Jamie Rich, who was my editor at DC, messaged me while I did the first Batman Secret Files short story for him. He said, "Is this all right? Is this how you want it? Because we credit last name only, and that means your credit is just going to be V on the comic." And I was like, I'm not sure about that. He's like, nah, I think it's cool. So we went with that, and ever since it has been this: are you round 5? Are you round 4? The other 4 rounds.
Ram
Yes.
the Beef.
I think it's pretty cool when you just see V up there. It kind of adds a little element of, mystery. Yeah. Makes me a little curious.
Good. I mean, it kind of forced me to work hard enough to where people will recognize who that is just from the last initial. So I'm like, okay, cool.
So if I brought my books for you to sign, would you just put V?
No, I do sign I do sign Ram V.
Oh, okay.
I wish I would just sign V. That would make signing books a lot easier.
That'd be so cool. Yeah. Just put V. There you go.
But you'd have to do a fancy V or something so people aren't just forging.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
All right. So before we get into Batman, Aquaman, Laila, Green and Blue, Blue and Green rather, I want to start with your own origin story. What drew you into writing, into comics, and how did you eventually find your way into this world?
Yeah, I mean, I actually studied to be a chemical engineer when I was back in India.
It sounds like a supervillain origin story instead of an author's origin.
Dun, dun, dun. Actually, it's pretty dramatic. So I was studying to be a chemical engineer. I was always going to be one. And I used to read comics as a kid. And I used to read a lot as a kid. I still do. But it spurred on my love of writing. And I don't remember exactly when. Maybe I was 12 or 13. I remember writing like a good significant chunk, something like 40, 50,000 words of what I thought was going to be the next great Lord of the Rings ripoff. But even so, I've had that commitment to writing since I was, in my early teens. Somewhere in there, my dad decided that I shouldn't be reading comics. So he took all of my comics and put them in trash bags and threw them away, and said, now you have to read proper books. Which was, see, supervillain origin right there. But then I had moved to the States when I was 20 to continue studying chemical engineering. And a friend of mine at the time, she gifted me volume 1 of Sandman for my birthday.
Oh, nice.
And that really kind of turned my head, blew my mind, and pulled me back into comics. But I thought nothing of it. I'd been writing as an amateur since, not comics, mostly prose, and I had a few things published here and there. And then 2013, I decided to pursue writing with a little bit more seriousness. So I quit my job, started writing, had a few things published, moved to the UK to study creative writing, and then towards the end of that course is really when I did my first book, which was a black and white crime noir without any crime, so existential noir book set in Mumbai, and that was kind of my first foray into comics. It opened a lot of doors for me, and then that happened in 2016. It came out in 2016, and then it's been kind of steady progress since then. I did an image book called Paradiso the next year. I did The Savage Shores in 2018, Blue and Green. Graffiti's Wall in 2019, then Blue and Green in 2020, and then 2019 was also my first DC short story, which was Batman Secret Files, and then a year later I did my first Marvel short story, which was Wolverine and Punisher as part of the War of the Realms stuff. So both my starting characters at DC and Marvel were Batman and Wolverine. Like, where do you go from there?
Yeah, you started high. Well, where you went over at Marvel from there anyway was shortly to Venom.
You make it sound so easy, like it's just I just started writing, and pretty soon I got some stuff out, and now here I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to. I've always been a sort of obsessive personality, and so once I get interested in something, you couldn't pull me away from it. And basically by the time I started writing with any kind of measure of seriousness, I had already put in probably hundreds of hours, if not thousands, into developing my writing as a hobby.
Right.
And you mentioned that you have an obsessive personality. So when I read Blue and Green, it feels like one of those obsessions that you had at some point is likely music.
Yeah. I used to play in a band, and I play like 4 different musical instruments. And I used to play blues with the band when I was in Philadelphia, which is where I studied for chemical engineering. So yeah, music's kind of been a part of me almost as long as writing has, to be honest. My dad kind of inculcated my love of music into me, and then just kind of stayed with me. Clearly, I was not meant to be a chemical engineer, because I did. That was the one thing I did with no measure of obsession.
Oh, there you go. Now, funny that your dad wanted you out of the comics, got you into music, and eventually you put music into your comics.
Yeah. I think my dad was, very pragmatic Indian dad, in that he wanted me to enjoy a lot of things, but he was also like, you need to have a job, you need to go work in a factory somewhere. So, but he was a Renaissance man in his own way.
Yeah.
But it is safe to say you're not going to be putting chemical engineering into your comics.
I do it all the time. Recently, I think DC had sent me someone else's story just to look at, because there were some Indian characters in it, and they wanted my take on, like, is everything okay? Are we spelling things right? Are they speaking correctly? And I was giving them notes on it, and then I couldn't help myself. I had to. There's a chemical reference in there to alkaline soil. I was like, this doesn't mean anything. This is not what they would say. And then, so all my other notes are like 2-line notes, and this one's like a paragraph, like why you should not call this alkali soil.
Well, it's really interesting that now you're going to be doing detective comics with the world's greatest detective, and you can bring that element into his detective work.
Yeah, I mean, it's been there. It was there even in Secret Files,
right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been part of everything I've done. It's there in Aquaman Andromeda as well. So I like my science fiction to be plausible, and I kind of use my engineering background and research background to kind of make it seem like these things could be possible.
Now, I want to jump back over. So you're no stranger to filling big shoes. You stepped into Venom along with Al Ewing following that huge run of Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman. How did you approach doing this alongside Al? How much of a partnership goes into that? Because you're both the credited writers on the series. And do you think are there things that you got to do differently coming into that title with Dylan having become Venom, as opposed to what you would have done had the Cates run ended with Eddie still in place?
I mean, to answer the second part of your question first, that was never a possibility, in that the first time I was approached, Al was already on the project, and they really wanted someone who was going to take Dylan's narrative and develop it as a much more grounded, much more sort of Earth-centric story, if you will. And so that was really the brief that was offered to me when I came in. So yeah, I didn't really consider what it might have been if I'd just taken over with Eddie. And in terms of collaborating with Al, yeah, Al's awesome. I've known Al since long before we were working on Venom. Al's actually one of the first people I showed 4 or 5 Xerox copied pages of Black Mamba to when he was at one of the conventions here in London. So that's how far back we go. And it's been a joy. It's been a pleasure collaborating. We co-plot everything. I think the idea of 2 narratives that are pushing and pulling at each other is super interesting, and it's great to be able to do that with someone that you can bounce ideas off of.
And coming in with a story like where Dylan is now Venom, it's an interesting point where people can either jump in not having read what came before and just like, okay, this is a new story with this new character that I didn't already know is Venom, or as part of the larger story following what Donnie and Ryan had done.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a great jumping on point. And I kind of like the idea of bringing in new readers. I like the idea of comics not being opaque or intimidating to get into. People have been asking, hey, Detective 1062, what homework do I need to do to enjoy your story? And I go, no, it's all right. You can just start with 1062 and you'll be fine. And so that has always been part of my endeavor, whether that was with Venom or whether that was with Swamp Thing as well. So yeah, I think that's a good thing. And clearly it presents me with a relatively clean canvas where I don't have to start the story trying to justify its existence in relation to 150 other things,
Yeah. And no worries of, well, 12 years ago in this issue, Dylan said this was
I don't worry about that stuff.
And yeah, but with a character like Dylan, you don't even have to worry about it.
Yeah, but I don't worry about it. I mean, I'm writing Swamp Thing, which is probably has a longer lineage in history than most of their comics. But yeah. I never worry about that stuff. The answer I always give people with that is go read any mythology, biblical mythology, Jewish mythology, Indian mythology. Every 2 chapters, you're going to find someone contradicting what happened 2 chapters ago.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to start off with God A is the brother of God B. And then 3 chapters in, like, God A and B are husband and wife. So I think great mythologies function like that. It's part of the joy of working in superhero comics for me is that kind of inherent contradiction and impossible relationships that you then, some brilliant writer will come along 40 years from now and justify and make sense of everything. So
now you mentioned getting into 1062 there. So the lineage that goes behind these books you're working on. So how did the detective job come your way, and did you feel any pressure because of a book that dates back to 1937 that wasn't there, or is it that same attitude that you're just telling your story?
No, I mean, I'm lucky in that sense, in that I got into writing DC and Marvel stuff based off of the work that I had done on my creator-owned books. So I've always had it in the back of my mind that the reason I'm offered these books, the reason I'm on the books that I am on is because of what I can do, and what I do is of interest to DC, Marvel, and their readers. And so I don't see a reason to change that approach, in that when I come to a story, it's because of what I can do with that title. And so in that sense, Detective wasn't really, it wasn't really offered to me in that sense. When I was finishing up my run on Catwoman and Justice League Dark, I knew I was going to be continuing with Swamp Thing. I knew I was going to do Aquaman. But DC were asking me, hey, what do you want to do next? What are you interested in? And I kind of went back and I said, look, I want to do something on a bigger scale, on a bigger platform than the stuff that I've done so far. And I said, here are two books that I would be interested in taking on whenever they become available. And Detective was one of them. And then about 2 months later, it so happened that the editors on Detective, there was an editorial swap, and my editor on Catwoman, Jessica Chen, was taking over Detective. And she's one of the editors that I'd had this conversation with. So she came back to me and said, hey, I enjoyed working with you on Catwoman, and I know you said you wanted to take on Detective when it becomes available. So can you get us a script 2 weeks from now? And that's how I started writing Detective.
Nice.
Cool.
Now, did that first script, did that end up being what is being published as your first detective story?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had this kind of Gothic opera take on Batman. I've had that in the back of my mind for years. I've known that there's a story to tell there. And that's part of the reason, like, I didn't go and ask for Detective because I thought Detective was a great book for me to write. I asked for it because I thought I had a great story to tell with it. And so, turning a script around in 2 weeks was not ideal, but I've had the story in the back of my mind for years. So
That's so cool. I mean, I'm always amazed at like writers that handle multiple books at the same time. And I think you're a little crazy sometimes.
I'm entirely in agreement, and which is why I'm trying not to write so many books at the same time.
How do I say this? How do you find yourself getting into the mind and voice of your characters? And I know that's pretty broad and general, but let's say, for example, Dylan with Venom versus Bruce with Batman.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that actually happens before you start writing any of the issues. I knew that with Venom, I kind of wanted to make it about a kid who's trying to rediscover his relationship with his father by going on a road trip in his father's jacket. You should think of the Venom suit as a jacket, if you will.
Yeah.
So, so I knew that was the underlying emotional narrative that I was going to write, and once you think about that, and once you kind of pull on personal experiences of people then it's kind of easy to formulate a real three-dimensional living character out of that. And then once you have that, it's pretty easy to slip back into that. With Batman and Bruce, I mean, I grew up watching the animated series, and I've been a Batman fan for quite some time. I've read a lot of the comics, so I have an idea of who Bruce Wayne is as a human being, as a person, in my head. And then all I have to do is marry that with the aesthetic that I know I want to have in the book. And then once I do that, the voice is there, the atmosphere is there, the tone is there. A lot of it is also just practice with writing. It's like, I grew up in a multilingual family, and it's like when I talk to my friends, I speak in Hindi or Marathi, and then I talk to my friends here in the UK, and I speak in English. You don't have to think twice about it. So it's kind of like that when you're writing, other characters across books.
Okay.
So your first detective arc, Gotham Nocturne, it's described as a Gothic opera. I'm not going to spoil what I've read in 1062, but what can readers expect from this first story?
So Gotham Nocturne is actually the name of the whole thing, the big story that I have in mind. The first arc of it is called Overture, much like an opera, and I believe it runs for 4 issues. Without giving away too much, I think I wanted to write a story where I was dealing with a Batman who is questioning his place in the bigger scheme of things, questioning his place in the city, that is now undergoing or about to undergo dramatic change, good/bad. And in investigating the cause, the root of that change, Batman becomes embroiled in this existential struggle where he is battling both actual demons out in the streets of Gotham and inner demons within himself. So that's kind of the general plot pitch. In terms of the aesthetics, when I say Gothic opera, I think people start thinking of musicals, but that's not what it is. In that, I wanted to bring...
Batman's not going to sing?
No comment.
Spoiler.
Okay.
But yeah, I wanted to bring both those sensibilities into the book. The Gothic sensibility of kind of having this sense of tragedy and noir and oppressive darkness kind of sitting over the entire narrative, where, all your characters have defining flaws, all your characters have baggage. So that's one part of the narrative aesthetic. And then I wanted to marry that with the operatic aesthetic, which is, high drama, like actors on a stage. There are flourishes of acting. The cadence matters. Your choice of words matters. And the best way I have to describe it is, imagine a dark Gothic kind of Wes Anderson film, or imagine a Batman story done in the style of the Hannibal TV show. Then you will have some sense of what my aesthetic is.
Very cool.
And for going for an aesthetic like that, was Raphael Albuquerque chosen specifically for this, or was he just who was always going to be working with you on this?
So there's a really interesting story with that, and sometimes you have to thank your stars, thank serendipity for putting people together. We were actually having a tough time finding the right kind of artist for the book, because if there was someone we thought whose aesthetic style married with the book, they were not available, or the people that were available were amazing but didn't quite marry with the style of story that Jess and I were putting together. So we were kind of getting a little bit disappointed in terms of oh man, who do we reach out to? And then 4 a.m. in the morning, I get a message from Jessica saying hey, totally out of the blue, I reached out to Raphael Albuquerque because I thought of his work on American Vampire and also Batman. And I thought he would be great in that style. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, he would be. But I didn't think we had a chance in hell of landing someone like Raphael Albuquerque on the book. And turns out he said yes. So there you go.
Awesome. Yeah, and his work looks great. I'll mention it. I have read 1062, and something about the tone that we're getting in the story through 1062 and Raphael's work works very well together.
Yeah, I mean it's part of the reason he said yes was Jessica conveyed to him that we were doing this operatic noir Gothic take on the book, and it was going to be more about the drama and the tragedy of it, rather than a super soldier action Batman or whatever it is. And the moment that was said, he was interested because it's such a natural progression, natural evolution for his work to kind of meld into that aesthetic. And so I'm glad it comes through in the book.
Now, I want to shift gears completely while we're talking about the art aesthetic, though, because another book with a really strong art aesthetic is Aquaman Andromeda. And that is just a very different Aquaman story with this deep sea horror element. I'm still holding my breath for a PDF of book 2, but book 1 plays out like a good horror movie where barely see not only the monster of the story, the villain, but even Aquaman himself, as we're really spending our time acclimating to the world and getting to know the main characters who are not Aquaman. We have like just these people. So where did the story for Andromeda come from?
Yeah, strangely, again, it's one of those things that I had wanted to do, and so I wasn't really offered the book. It was Black Label coming to me and saying, "Hey, if we asked you to pitch for Black Label, give us a few pitches, and off the beaten path characters are fine, as long as they're not so obscure that we're gonna run into sales problems." So I was like, "Yeah, let me do a horror Aquaman book." And as soon as I said that, they were like, "Say more." And so I'm a big fan of deep sea horror. I'm a big fan of tech sci-fi survival horror in general. You know, your Event Horizons, Abyss, The Sphere, all of that. And I quite like that genre of storytelling. I think it marries really well to my tendencies to occasionally write talkie books, and I think Aquaman certainly a talkie book. But the thing that fascinated me and the thing that I was trying to do, and I'm glad it comes across, is I wanted to treat both the sort of big evil thing under the water and Aquaman as equally surprising, equally terrifying myths. And that's what it feels like, hopefully, in that here are these human beings going into a place that is unknown for first contact with an alien creature. You could be defining their first meeting with Aquaman in those same terms.
Yeah, whichever of these two things is approaching them, they'll likely be equally frightened of.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people listening have already read issue 1, but it's only a 3-issue series, and from how far we get in book 1, it feels like it's going to be a whole lot happening over the next 2 books.
Yeah, I feel like it's a snowball that turns into an avalanche by the end. So I think stuff happens. Definitely, there's definitely plot progression in 2, and then at the beginning of 3, like all the shits hit the fan.
And they should have Christian Ward draw an underwater monster in everything he draws.
Christian
Christian
is amazing at delivering scale. This is what I have learned. Like, if you look at his work, it always feels dramatic in scale, and that is an unusual talent. And so to have someone like that either drawing space or drawing underwater stuff is just perfect marriage.
Did you get to keep any of the artwork?
It's all digital. He does everything digitally. So yeah, I've saved all the emails.
There you go.
There you go. Do you collect any artwork from your stories?
Occasionally, I have pages from Justice League Dark. I have pages from the Swamp Thing annual that I did with PM March, and I have a page from one of the Swamp Thing issues that I did with Mike Perkins as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm generally terrible at collecting things because I treat everything badly. So part of me is just afraid to collect more things that are actually valuable, because I'm like, what if I step on it? Because I'm entirely capable of doing this. So so yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant to collect things like original art, because I don't want to, because I'll never forgive myself if I ruin it. But I absolutely will ruin it knowing how I am. So
what's it like as a writer? You know, you present a script to the artist, and you don't. I mean, I'm sure there's constant communication, emails going back and forth, but what's it like when you get like the final page or book back and seeing your story laid out on page for the first time? Do you ever find, you know, new elements that the artist brought that you thought, wow, why didn't I think of that? Or
Yeah, all the
embellish
time. It's like,
on adding, you know, the text to the story?
yeah, it's like being in a band, really, where you're like, oh, guys, I have this tune in my head, and you just start kind of laying down a riff, or you start humming it, and really good bands, you know, a person sat across from you, say you're a guitarist or you're a drummer, they start doing a thing that is in response to that, and it's not them just playing along with what you're doing; it's them adding to what you're doing,
Right.
and then you can hear that addition in real time, and then you modify what you're doing because it works, and then
Right.
eventually that kind of back and forth, you end up, when you're jamming, I call it like achieving flow. Like you end up at this moment where you're like, okay, the song is writing itself now. Everybody's on the same page, and everybody knows what this sounds like. And I think working with a good collaborator feels like that. You know, someone like a Mike Perkins, for example. Yeah, it feels like that all the time. Where, you know, I've written the script, it goes to Mike, and when it comes back from Mike, it has added to what the script was, and so the lettering draft changes based on what Mike has done. And yeah, it all looks amazing. Hopefully, when it goes to the readers, it feels like one story and not a writer and an artist and a letterer and a colorist working together.
Yeah, and that's such a great analogy, because I've played in bands for, gosh, almost 20 years, and you're exactly right. You come in with an original idea, or what you think it is an original idea.
Mhm.
Hopefully, it's an original idea, and you have it set in your mind. Okay, this is kind of the song, but then when another creative voice brings their element, you hear things in a whole different light.
Yeah.
Um, and it can dramatically change, you know, what was your original concept, versus the finished product. That's kind of what I was hoping to hear from your response. I do also have one other question. Gosh, and I just forgot it.
Senior moment.
Senior moment. Sorry.
Okay, well, I've got something that I wanted to pivot back to, maybe while he tries to remember that. So you mentioned how you don't collect things like the original art, and that's something that I considered when I was reading. I forget which book it was I was reading, that I wondered if that it may have been part of Blue and Green, where it was, you know, his mother's collection of old stuff, and I was wondering if that came from like your own tendency to collect old memorabilia like that. But more specifically, I want to talk. So there's a page in Blue and Green
Mhm.
where you really vividly described Dieter's sensation after falling from the roof as he was a child.
Yeah.
And as he was laying there awake but unable to move, a body paralyzed by shock. And
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, if the ability to describe moments like that ever come from a personal experience, or is it just being a writer, that's just what you do, is putting those things into words? Were there any moments in books like Blue, Green, or Layla where you were able to draw from your own experiences to create these really hyper-focused descriptions of what the characters were feeling?
Well, to actually go back to the first part that you talked about, um, it's Dieter going through his mother's old belongings, and so I do completely have a fascination for rummaging through other people's collections. So I don't collect things myself, but if you put me in a warehouse with stuff that belonged to other people, like I will obsessively go through all of it. Um, and so there's that fascination, because it's like learning. It's like discovering another person, but they're not there in front of you. And so you only discover them through the things they own, and I think that's fascinating.
I bet you'll love estate sales, don't you?
Put me in a storage unit, lock the door.
Now that's a mystery that you could put in a book.
Actually, I do have a story idea based off something like that, which we will not divulge here.
Oh, okay.
To answer the second part of your question, I think the most authentic writing always comes, to whatever extent, from personal experience, and it's also part of the reason, writers. I think it was Gaiman who said in one of his interviews said, the best advice I can give to you in terms of writing is put down your pen and paper and go outside and live your life and get your heart broken. And I think it sounds romantic, but that's good advice to take, because if you don't experience things uniquely in the way that you experience them, then there's going to be nothing authentic or unique about the way you write. So I think that's important. I traveled a lot as a chemical engineer for work, and I've been in interesting situations, and I've been to places where there are culturally unique experiences to take in. So that does inform my writing quite a bit. The other part of it, in terms of your skill as a writer, it depends really on what you want to do with it. I mean, if you're someone like a J.M. Coetzee or a Hemingway, you kind of don't want to describe anything beyond its sort of objective self. And so there are descriptions that work like that. But I like to work in a way where hopefully my descriptions achieve like some form of synesthesia, in that you are no longer being described something's texture or shape or sound or smell, but the description kind of melds into what that feels like. And yeah, part of that is skill with words, and the other part is having experienced that yourself. Another great writing quote is from Carver, who says the writer's job is to take the familiar and make it unfamiliar all over again.
That's deep.
I'm just sitting with that one.
Well, I mean, I was thinking about that. I was like, wow, that's pretty reflective and personal. I remembered my question.
Oh, there we go.
This is a little bit more, I don't know, technical, but what style do you write in? Do you write full script or quote unquote Marvel style, or do you just kind of go with the artist and say, hey, what works best for you?
I always write full script. I don't know how to write plot style or Marvel style or however it's called. I can't. The obsessive control freak in me can't deal with the idea, or panics at the idea of writing a script that is just plot and then getting something back and then having to fit letters to whatever is on the page. I can't grapple with that idea.
So do you lay it out panel by panel, or just say, hey, on this page, this is what's happening?
I mean, everything is laid out panel by panel. There are fairly detailed descriptions about what each panel contains, not necessarily framing directions, or like, I don't like telling artists like, this guy is standing on the left, that guy is standing on the right. No, I don't do that. My panel descriptions tend to be more, this is how this panel feels. This is the mood. This is what the character is thinking when he delivers this line. I think we should see this character's expression here. Or sometimes I'll work in a very specific moment of acting, like, he bangs his hand down on the table and we focus on that for this panel. So there's certainly detailed directions there, but they're not staging or framing directions. They're narrative directions. And I always tell the artist, I apologize for the level of detail. If you feel like throwing stuff out the window, more than happy to see what you come up with. So
that's cool. I always like whenever DC publishes like the, I guess, director's cut of their issues, and it shows like the full script. I like to break down the script of the writers. I know comics is focused solely on or largely focused on the art, but I like to break down how the artist, or I'm getting myself confused. I like to break down how the writers, establish their beats and the pacing and just how they
See,
told the story.
I think what you said there's really interesting. You said like comics is mostly focused on the art. See, I think you can, when you read a comic, you can tell, except very rare occasions, but mostly you can tell if this was a comic written by a writer and then an artist took their script, or at least I can tell, versus this is a writer artist who is writing for their own art. I can always tell the difference between something that reads like a Mignola book, or like Jeff Lemire writing his own or drawing his own stuff, versus something that Mignola is drawing based off of someone else's script, or something that Jeff has written that has gone to, say Andrea Sorrentino for art. And so I think it fundamentally changes what the comic reads and feels like to have a collaborative work versus an auteur work. Right. The only exception, or one of the rare exceptions I've come across to that, is someone like a Miller, where I can't tell the difference between, I mean, I can because I know his art, but in terms of the reading experience, I can't tell the difference between when he writes for someone else versus he writes and draws himself.
This is a complete jump back to other things before, but books like Laila and Blue and Green can seem like they're on the topic of death and dying, but I feel like they're at least equally on the topic of life and living, whichever way people see it. Is this like recurring theme just something that you naturally find in yourself when you're writing your own your creator-owned stories?
I mean, I think to an extent, my creator-owned stories tend to, on the thematic level, bigger picture level at least, try and grapple with / touch on more existential themes. So I think life and death, very much an existential theme. I don't think necessarily Blue and Green contends with life or death in that way, but I think suffering for reward, suffering for artistic greatness is again one of those existential questions. And so my tendency is to thematically investigate, explore those things, because I think that's the whole point. That's the human experience, right? You if you've ever contended with, someone's death, if you're thought about death, and if you're worried about life, and in some way you've gone through all of these thoughts in your head, not necessarily articulated as a story. And I think all successful fiction on some level touches on existential obsessions like that.
Now, I don't want to keep you in here any longer than you actually have time for.
Yeah, I've got like 5 more minutes.
Yeah, Gramps, did you want to try to get a bit of a lightning round in here?
Oh, okay. So what we have on the lightning round is just, a chance to get to know you, outside the comic world, so we have some kind of rapid fire questions that we just throw out, and you can
hope for the best.
Hope for the best. So you live in, is it London?
Yeah.
Do you ever go on that big circus wheel?
Once.
What's it like driving in London?
I don't drive in London. It would be crazy to drive in London.
Who's your favorite bands?
Too many to name, but probably Tool, Black Keys, Nirvana. Oh man, there's two. I'm just gonna fall down a music hole if we go from here. So
no, you're in good company because those are some of our favorites too.
I'm glad.
So, living in London, do you sport at all?
No, not really. I used to, but not anymore.
I don't imagine they have very good pizza in London. Is that correct?
They have excellent pizza in London.
Really?
Considering pizza is a European dish.
Well, that's true. Well,
there goes America thinking they own everything.
There we go. Hey, so what's the best pizza place in London?
I don't know. There's probably tons that I haven't had pizza at yet. But I do like. There's a place called. God, I'm forgetting its name now. Yeah, we're gonna have to edit that part out. I don't remember the name. There's a cafe right next to my place that makes excellent pizza.
So you live part of your time in the States in Philadelphia, correct?
Yeah.
Did you ever run up those steps and do the Rocky pose?
No, I ran up those steps and yelled at people trying to do the Rocky pose.
What did you yell?
Stop it! Stop it! It's a really old film. Why are you still here?
All right. This is more on a personal level. And this is one I just thought of at the top of my head. I don't know why. But, you mentioned being obsessive compulsive by nature. This is something that I'm obsessive compulsive about. And this is kind of, I'm going to relate it to paper towels. I guess you could relate it to toilet paper too, but are you an over or under roller guy?
Under.
Under? Really?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Under?
Maybe it's a Commonwealth thing.
I feel like we're gonna fall out over this.
It tells me a lot.
I'm with you.
It tells me a lot. You're an under. Okay. I guess they don't have good barbecue in London, though. Is that correct?
Oh, I was when you said you were going to relate it to paper towels, I was going to cut in with, I'm going to relate it to barbecue.
I know people barbecue a lot, but I will say American barbecue beats out barbecuing in London. So,
all right, well, that's good. British music, the UK music, I listen to that more. So they win the music, we win the barbecue. That's a fair trade. What else we got that we usually hit on? What's your favorite snack? Like when you're writing a story, what do you snack on?
It changes from time to time, but right now my favorite snack is mochi ice cream. Rice dough balls. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's basically Japanese rice dough filled with roasted hazelnut ice cream.
Oh.
Yeah, they're amazing. I blame Kieran Gillen because he's the one who put me onto them.
Making us look like snack chumps.
What is some of your favorite movies?
Again, one of those questions that will be here all day, and I'll keep coming up with a different list each time. So let's not even bother. I watched too many of them. So, yeah.
Since we're chiefly here to, we're meant to be talking about Batman, what did you think of the recent Batman film?
I thought it was good. A return to more character-focused Batman, which I like. But I thought the last half an hour of the movie felt tacked on to what would have been a good film otherwise.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I get that.
Now, your bio says dog person. What kind of dog do you have? Or you like?
I have a Jack Russell Terrier, a 4-year-old Jack Russell Terrier at home with me, but he's not allowed into my office. So,
Oh,
yeah.
He's mischievous, huh? Or distracting.
Yeah, mostly distracting. He
Yeah.
does come up here from time to time. I'm terrible in terms of disciplining.
Those are very smart dogs.
They are exceptionally smart. And then I've got an 8-year-old Labrador Retriever back in India who's now living with my my in-laws because I didn't want to put him on a flight and bring him over here and sedate him for 8 or 9 hours and all of that stuff. So.
Do your pets have social media?
No, I don't. I barely have social media.
Okay. I asked that because I have a dog that has his own social media.
Yeah, no, I just can't. I mean, I like the idea of it, and I will spend hours looking at other people's pets, but I can't be bothered putting photographs of me or my pets up on the internet.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a dangerous rabbit hole. You get sucked into some of these Instagram reels, and I'll
there's only so many obsessive things I can do.
Okay.
Won't get anything done. All right. Well, we should let you finally exit here.
Yeah.
So again, to loop back, July 26th, Detective Comics 1062, first issue from Rom V, Raphael Albuquerque, and Dave Stewart. And also, we talked about a few of his other books here, and if you have not yet expanded your horizons, you're really missing lots of great stuff out there. So the next time you go into your comic shop and that you're disappointed that there's only 1 or 2 DC and Marvel books there for you, check out other things. There are award-winning and award-nominated books like Many Deaths of Layla Starr, Blue and Green, These Savage Shores, and tons of stuff from other creators too. So check out other things. You're going to find things you love. But thank you, Rom. Is there anything else you want to leave people with before they read Detective 1062?
No, that's it. You covered everything in your very, very kind outro little spiel. So thank you so much.
Thank you for taking some time to do this. Safe travels to America and San Diego Comic-Con, and good luck for that whole week.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Hopefully I come back without any viruses. So.
Oh, hopefully so. Wear 2 masks.
I will.
All right. Have a great week, and hopefully we'll chat with you again soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.